The heavy oak doors of Fort Lyon's small church creaked open as the townsfolk filed out, their hushed whispers swirling around Tabitha Davis like a dust devil in the Colorado Territory of 1878. She stood alone on the church steps, her white wedding gown catching the afternoon sun, tears streaming down her face as the reality set in Henry Blackburn, her fiancé of 2 years, wasn't coming. The telegram had arrived just moments before the ceremony was to begin, delivered by a reluctant station clerk who couldn't meet her eyes. Deal failed, stop, cannot marry, stop, leaving for California, stop. "I'm sorry, Miss Davis," Reverend Porter said, his voice laced with pity. "Perhaps we should get you inside, away from prying eyes." Tabitha shook her head, her veil fluttering in the autumn breeze. "No," she whispered. "I need air." The townsfolk had dispersed, leaving her alone with her humiliation. Her parents had passed 3 years ago from influenza, and with no family left in Fort Lyon, she felt utterly abandoned. 22 years old and publicly jilted, her reputation in this small town was ruined. "Miss, you'll catch your death standing out here like this." The deep voice startled her. Tabitha turned to find a tall figure approaching the church, a man she recognized but had never formally met. Caleb Irwin, a cattle rancher whose property bordered the town. He was known as a solitary man, keeping to himself except when bringing cattle to market or picking up supplies. Caleb's face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the concern in his blue eyes. Dust covered his denim pants and cotton shirt, suggesting he'd ridden hard to get here. "I'm fine," she lied, hastily wiping away tears. "You don't look fine," he said, climbing the steps to stand beside her. "You look like a bride without a groom." The blunt observation broke something inside her. "That's exactly what I am," Tabitha confessed, her voice cracking. "Henry sent word he's not coming. Everyone saw. Everyone knows." Caleb's expression darkened. "Henry Blackburn?" She nodded. "Never did trust that man," he muttered. He studied her for a long moment, then removed his hat, revealing sandy brown hair. "Miss Davis, I don't mean to be forward, but I heard what happened while riding into town. The news is spreading faster than a prairie fire." Fresh tears threatened. "Wonderful. My humiliation is complete." "It doesn't have to be," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Caleb squared his shoulders, his expression resolute. "I'll be your groom today." Tabitha stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "I beg your pardon, I'm offering to marry you, right now, today." A startled laugh escaped her. "Mr. Irwin, we barely know each other. We've exchanged perhaps 10 words before today." "Sometimes 10 words tell you more than 1,000 conversations," he said. "I know you work at the Mercantile. I know you're kind to children who come in. I know you helped Mrs. Wilkins when her husband was laid up with a broken leg. And I know you don't deserve what Blackburn did to you." Tabitha shook her head, bewildered by this unexpected proposal. "This is madness. Why would you offer such a thing?" Caleb looked away, his jaw tightening. "I have my reasons." "I need better than that if you're asking for my hand." He sighed, then met her gaze directly. "My cattle operation is growing. I need a wife to help run the household. You need a husband to avoid becoming the subject of town gossip for years to come. It's a practical arrangement." The practical nature of his offer stung more than she expected. "So this is a business proposition?" "It's a chance," he said simply. "For both of us." Tabitha looked down at her wedding dress, the dress she'd spent months making, every stitch sewn with dreams that had evaporated like morning dew. Her options were few. She could return to the small room she rented above the Mercantile, face the pitying glances and whispered conversations, or she could take this stranger's offer and forge a new path. "You don't love me," she said. "No," he admitted. "And you don't love me." But respect and kindness might be a stronger foundation than whatever Blackburn offered you. Something in his steady gaze gave her courage. "You're serious about this?" "I don't make offers I don't intend to keep, Miss Davis." Reverend Porter emerged from the church, surprise registering on his face when he saw Caleb. "Mr. Irwin, this is unexpected. Is there something I can help you with?" Before Tabitha could speak, Caleb turned to the minister. "Yes, Reverend, you can marry us." The Reverend's eyes widened. "I beg your pardon. Miss Davis needs a husband. I'm offering to be that husband." The Reverend looked between them, confusion evident. "Mr. Irwin, marriage is a sacred covenant before God. It's not something to enter into impulsively." "Nothing impulsive about it," Caleb replied. "I've been watching Miss Davis for over a year. I know what kind of woman she is." This revelation surprised Tabitha. He'd been watching her. "Miss Davis," the Reverend said gently, "is this what you want, was it?" Tabitha searched her heart. She dreamed of love, of a marriage like her parents had shared. But dreams were luxuries not always afforded to women in the West. "Yes," she said finally, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Yes, I'll marry Mr. Irwin." The ceremony was brief, witnessed only by the Reverend's wife and the church custodian. Tabitha spoke her vows in a clear voice, refusing to let uncertainty cloud this moment. When Caleb slid a simple gold band onto her finger where had he gotten a ring. His hands were surprisingly gentle. "I pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Porter declared, still looking somewhat concerned about the hasty union. Caleb hesitated only a moment before leaning down to place a chaste kiss on her lips, his own warm and unexpectedly soft. It was over in an instant, but Tabitha felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with fear. "Mrs. Irwin," he said, offering his arm, "shall we?" The ride to Caleb's ranch was silent. Tabitha perched awkwardly on the saddle in front of her new husband, her wedding dress gathered around her. The vastness of the Colorado prairie stretched before them, golden grasses swaying in the afternoon breeze. In the distance, she could make out a homestead nestled against a backdrop of rolling hills. "That's your home?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Our home," he corrected. "It's not much to look at yet, but the land is good." As they drew closer, Tabitha could see a substantial log cabin with a stone chimney, a barn, and several outbuildings. A small garden plot was visible, though it looked neglected. "I haven't had time for growing much besides cattle," Caleb explained, following her gaze. "The garden was my mother's project before she passed last year." "I'm sorry for your loss," Tabitha said softly. "Did your father?" "Died in the war. It was just Ma and me for a long time." They dismounted at the hitching post. Caleb helped her down, his strong hands encircling her waist, setting her gently on the ground. He seemed suddenly awkward, as if unsure what to do with his new bride. "I'll show you around," he offered, leading her to the cabin. Inside, the home was clean but sparse. A main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area with a cast iron stove, a small bedroom off to one side. Everything was functional, nothing frivolous. "It's not what you're used to, I expect," Caleb said, watching her face. "It's a good home," Tabitha said honestly. She had grown up in a similar cabin before her parents' deaths. "The bedroom is yours," he continued. "I'll sleep out here until—" He trailed off, color rising in his cheeks. "Until we know each other better," Tabitha finished for him. He nodded, grateful for her understanding. "Are you hungry?" "I can fix something." "I'll do it," she said, moving toward the kitchen. "I'm your wife now. This is my responsibility." Caleb caught her arm gently. "Tabitha," he said, the first time he'd used her given name, "you're not my servant. This marriage may have started unusually, but I intend to be a good husband to you." His sincerity touched her. "Thank you." That night, after a simple meal of salt pork and beans, Tabitha lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to Caleb moving about in the main room. She had married a stranger. The weight of that decision pressed upon her, yet she felt oddly at peace. There was something solid about Caleb Irwin, something trustworthy in those blue eyes. The days turned into weeks, and Tabitha found herself settling into life at the ranch. She took over the neglected garden, planning what to plant come spring. She mended Caleb's clothes, cooked meals, and kept the cabin in order. They developed a routine, working side by side during the day, talking over meals, getting to know each other in small, careful steps. Caleb proved to be a man of few words but many actions. He built her a proper washstand when she mentioned difficulty washing clothes. He brought home seeds from town when she expressed interest in flowers. Each night, he slept on a bedroll before the fire, never pressuring her for more. One evening in late November, as the first snow dusted the prairie, they sat before the fire, Tabitha mending a shirt, Caleb whittling a piece of wood. "May I ask you something?" she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Anything." "Why did you really marry me?" Caleb's hand stilled. He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. "You know Henry Blackburn was trying to buy up land around Fort Lyon." Tabitha nodded. Henry had talked often of his business ventures, though she'd paid little attention to the details. "He tried to pressure me into selling my ranch. When I refused, he threatened to ruin me." Caleb's expression hardened. "Said he had connections with the railroad, that they'd divert the planned route away from Fort Lyon if I didn't sell." "The railroad is coming through Fort Lyon." Tabitha was surprised. Such news would have spread quickly. That was his claim. I didn't believe him, but he was convincing enough that several smaller ranchers sold to him. "What does this have to do with our marriage?" Caleb met her eyes. 2 days before your wedding, I learned Blackburn was planning to leave town, that there was no railroad deal. He'd swindled good people out of their land. I rode to Denver to confront him, but he'd already fled. Understanding dawned on Tabitha. "You knew he wouldn't show up for our wedding," Caleb nodded. "I tried to get back in time to warn you, but—" He sighed. "I was too late. When I saw you standing there, abandoned." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "You pitied me," Tabitha said, her voice small. "No," he said firmly. "I admired you, your strength, standing there with your head high despite what he'd done. And I hated what Blackburn did to you almost as much as what he did to this town. So you married me out of some sense of justice." Caleb set aside his whittling and moved to kneel before her. "I married you because I've watched you for a year, too shy to approach you properly. Because when Blackburn started courting you, I kicked myself every day for my cowardice. Because when I saw you on those church steps, I thought maybe fate was giving me a second chance I didn't deserve." Tabitha's heart fluttered at his confession. "You could have told me this. Would you have believed me? A man you barely knew, claiming to have admired you from afar, proposing marriage minutes after you'd been jilted." She laughed softly. "When you put it that way, it does sound rather suspect." His expression grew serious. "Tabitha, I didn't expect to feel anything but respect for you when we married. I thought we could build a partnership based on mutual need, but these past weeks—" He took her hand gently. "I find myself thinking of you even when you're in the next room. I find myself wanting to make you smile to protect you two." He stopped, seemingly afraid he'd said too much. Tabitha squeezed his hand. "To what, Caleb?" "To be a real husband to you," he finished quietly, "but only when you're ready, if you're ever ready." The sincerity in his eyes moved her deeply. This man who had rescued her from public humiliation, who worked from sunrise to sunset, who treated her with nothing but respect, was offering her his heart. "I think," she said softly, "I might be ready to try." That night, Caleb joined her in the bedroom, both of them nervous as newlyweds should be. His kiss was tentative at first, then deepening as she responded. In the darkness, they discovered each other, their union becoming real in every sense. As winter settled over the Colorado territory, Tabitha and Caleb's connection grew stronger. They shared stories of their childhoods, their hopes, their fears. She learned he'd fought briefly in the war before being sent home with a bullet in his shoulder. He discovered she had a talent for numbers, having kept the mercantile's books for years. In early December, they rode into Fort Lyon for supplies. Tabitha held her head high as they walked through town, ignoring the curious stares. Many folks had heard of her hasty marriage but hadn't seen the couple since the unexpected ceremony. At the mercantile, Mrs. Green, the owner, greeted Tabitha warmly. "My dear, how wonderful to see you. Marriage agrees with you." "Thank you," Tabitha smiled. "It does indeed." As Caleb selected tools and supplies, Mrs. Green leaned close to Tabitha. "You should know, Henry Blackburn's schemes have been exposed. The bank in Denver caught him trying to use forged documents to secure loans against the properties he'd acquired. He's been arrested." The news should have brought satisfaction, but Tabitha found she cared little about Henry's fate. "I wish him no ill will," she said honestly. "His actions led me to Caleb." Mrs. Green smiled knowingly. "Love has a way of finding us when we least expect it. Love." The word resonated within Tabitha. Was that what she felt for Caleb? The warmth that spread through her when he smiled, the sense of rightness when they worked together, the peace she found in his arms at night. As they rode home, snow began to fall, large flakes that melted on Tabitha's eyelashes. "We should hurry," Caleb said, eyeing the darkening sky. "Looks like a proper storm coming." The snow fell heavier as they approached the ranch, the wind picking up, driving icy particles against their faces. By the time they reached the cabin, visibility was poor, the world transformed into a swirling white void. "Get inside," Caleb directed, helping Tabitha down. "I need to check on the livestock." "Be careful," she urged, concern etching her features. Tabitha built up the fire and prepared a hot meal while waiting for Caleb. As the minutes stretched into an hour, anxiety gnawed at her. The storm had developed into a full blizzard, howling winds battering the cabin. Just as she was considering going to search for him, the door burst open, bringing a swirl of snow and a snow-covered Caleb. "Thank God," she breathed, rushing to help him remove his frozen outer clothes. "Lost track of 2 calves," he explained through chattering teeth. "Had to bring them into the barn." Tabitha guided him to the fire, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "You're frozen through, you could have died out there." "Worth it to save those calves," he said stubbornly. "They're our future." She pressed a cup of hot coffee into his hands. "And what about my future? What would I do if something happened to you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "You'd survive," he said finally. "You're stronger than you know." "Surviving isn't living," she countered. "I've done enough surviving these past years." She knelt before him, taking his cold hands in hers. "I don't want to merely survive anymore, Caleb. I want to live, with you." His eyes searched hers. "What are you saying, Tabitha?" "I'm saying that I love you," she declared, the words feeling right as they left her lips. "What began as a marriage of convenience has become the greatest blessing of my life." Caleb's expression softened, wonder replacing exhaustion. "You love me?" "Yes," she affirmed. "I love how you care for this land, how you respect me as your partner, how you—" He cut her off with a kiss, pulling her into his arms. "I've loved you since the first time I saw you helping that little Harper girl pick out ribbon for her mother's birthday," he confessed when they broke apart. "I never thought you'd look twice at a rough rancher like me." "You're the best man I've ever known," Tabitha said firmly. That night, As the blizzard raged outside, they found warmth in each other's arms, their love a shelter against the storm. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. The garden Tabitha had planned flourished under her care, providing fresh vegetables for their table. Caleb's cattle herd had grown, the ranch prospering under their joint management. On a warm May evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Caleb took Tabitha's hand. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her toward the barn. Inside, he directed her attention to a corner where a wooden cradle stood, beautifully crafted with intricate carvings. "Caleb," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "It's beautiful." "I've been working on it for weeks," he admitted. "Ever since you told me about the baby." Tabitha placed a hand on her still flat stomach. The child wouldn't arrive until winter, but already they planned and dreamed. "You think we're ready?" she asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Caleb wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her head. "I think we'll figure it out together, just like we've figured everything else out." Tabitha turned in his embrace to face him. "When I stood on those church steps last fall, I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was just beginning." "I thank God every day for bringing you to me," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. "Even if the circumstances were less than ideal." "They left me stranded at the church steps," Tabitha mused, "but you said I'll be your groom today." "Those were the most important words anyone's ever said to me." "And I meant them," Caleb assured her. "I'll be your husband every day for the rest of our lives." The future stretched before them, as vast and promising as the Colorado prairie. There would be challenges, harsh winters, difficult harvests, the trials of raising children in the untamed West, but Tabitha felt no fear. With Caleb beside her, she could face anything. In the years that followed, Fort Lyon grew as more settlers moved west. Tabitha and Caleb welcomed 3 children, first a son they named Thomas after her father, then twin girls, Sarah and Emma. The Irwin Ranch became known for its fine cattle and generous hospitality. Sometimes, when guests visited, they'd ask how the couple had met. Caleb would take Tabitha's hand, a smile playing at his lips, and say, "I married the most beautiful woman in Colorado Territory on the day another man made the worst mistake of his life." And Tabitha would laugh, leaning into her husband's strength, knowing that what had begun as a desperate arrangement had blossomed into a love story that would be told for generations. On their 20th anniversary, Caleb presented Tabitha with a proper diamond ring to accompany the simple band he'd placed on her finger that fateful day. "I always meant to get you something finer," he explained. "Something worthy of you." Tabitha kissed him softly. "The only thing worthy of me is you, Caleb Irwin. You and this life we've built together." As the sun set on their ranch, now expanded to one of the largest in the territory, they stood hand in hand on the porch of the home they'd created. The church steps where they'd first spoken seemed a lifetime ago, yet neither would change a moment of their journey. Sometimes love arrives in unexpected ways, not in grand romantic gestures, but in the quiet offer of a helping hand when all seems lost. For Tabitha and Caleb, true love hadn't been the beginning of their story, it had been the destination, discovered one day at a time, built through respect, kindness, and shared dreams on the wild Colorado frontier.